Live. Hello everyone, give us a wave. Brilliant, nice to see you all. I've not seen you for a couple of weeks. I've coloured my background, by the way, and slagged off the competition. So hopefully this will go viral. As part of the series that we're doing with exceptional people who have had exceptional lives, who could teach us maybe a thing or two about living in this moment, I'm delighted to say that we have a new friend of mine. Cheers. So Ian Stafford, Ian's the guy who runs the sporting club. So that's the event where we've got loads of celebrity sports people talking the talk. You get a chance to meet them in the real world. And last night you had Sam Allardyce on a webinar with him. But that's not his background. So Ian Stafford is 30 years a sports journalist, an author, a commentator, and all-round knowledgeable bloke about all things sport. And what we thought would be really interesting, and I begged him to do this for us, is to have an opportunity to look at sports people, elite sports people, and the things that they've got in common, and how that might be used by us as things we can teach or have the certain disciplines that will help us, certainly in times like this. So we've got you on mute. The idea is for me to throw this over to Ian. When we say Ian talk for 30 minutes, we probably about 2.5 hours out of him. He can tell a story and he's brilliant fun. And then any questions. So think of any questions that we might have to ask. We were just talking then offline about football, getting on the game, getting the game back, and what that might mean to people. Herd immunity and how London looks like it's all right. So there's loads of things that we can talk about because he's a very clever, very bright, very entrepreneurial man. So without more ado, Ian, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate you giving this the time. Over to you, sir, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Well, thanks very much, Gary, for those glowing words. People are going to think I must have something on you or something, because that's one of the nicest things anybody said about me for a while. Hello, everybody else. Hopefully you can all see me. And thanks so much for rocking up to listen to what I have to say. And I thought what I would do is just a couple of minutes on a little bit of my background so that you can understand why I'm about to say what I'm about to say. And then I'll get into why sports people are so interesting and deliver so many messages way beyond sport, life messages, business messages. So very, very quickly, a quick background. I'm in my 50s. I know, hard to believe, but it's true. I was a national sports writer, international sports writer for 30 years. I'm not going to lie, I had an absolute blast. I went around the world, sitting in all the great stadia, covering all the great events, World Cups, Olympics, Rugby World Cups, boxing, world title fights, everything. And also got to know an awful lot of the sports stars. And really, as much as I enjoyed doing the reporting and breaking stories, it was the interviewing that I particularly liked. And I never really interviewed people tell us about your goal or tell us about your innings in the test match or the physical stuff that they did in sport. It was human interest, because I find sports people fascinating because as Gary has just touched upon, you know, the attributes that they've used to succeed are pretty much the same attributes that we all need to succeed. You know, they have a skill set. They're very talented at what they do. Hopefully everybody on this webinar is also very talented at what they do. So that's a given. So what is it that makes winners amongst winners? And I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by, you know, absolute winners amongst winners. The other sort of claim to fame I have, in inverted commas, is, yeah, I've written many books, 16 books, but the ones that stand out are the participatory ones, where I actually went around the world and played sport with or against some of the greatest teams and some of the greatest individuals in the world, and in doing so got their story. So I was the puppet, if you like. I was the person, like probably most of us here today, who were pretty good at sport. You know, I was in the school sports team for everything, played county sport. So at public level, I was good, but I wasn't good enough to go all the way. But I've gone through life deluded that I could have done. then when you hang out with these stars, you realise how big the gulf is. And that's when you realise so, for example, I wrote this book, Playgrounds of the Gods. I played squash with Jamshid Khan in Pakistan. I played cricket with the Australian team, led by Steve Waugh. I learnt to box and did 3 rounds against Roy Jones Jr. I was part of Steve Redgrave's four-man crew just prior to the Sydney Olympics. And I went running with the Kenyans, who obviously dominate middle distance running. I was a substitute for the Springboks, for the South African rugby team against Ireland. And what I discovered is that if you put all of those people in the same room, regardless of their geographical differences, their political differences, their religious differences, their upbringing, everything about them is different. But they would absolutely recognize the same animal, the same beast in that room. And it is all about the top 6 inches. And that is what separates the best from the rest, without any doubt at all. That is so. At the sporting club, which I founded and I own and been going for 2.5 years, yes, we have clubs we can hang out with, lots of venues in London and Manchester, but we also pride ourselves in doing these events. And I always use sports stars, and the reason why I do it is because there's absolutely nothing wrong with Bill Bloggs, who built this company up from absolutely nothing to a £1 billion company, over 20 years, and massive respect for this guy. Absolutely brilliant. Wish I could do that. Hope I will. But we don't really know who this guy is. We haven't followed this person's progress. The thing about a sports star is that we've watched them fail. We've watched them succeed. They do it in the biggest shop window of all. And when they fail, it's very high profile, and when they succeed, they do so as well. Half of them are our heroes anyway, and as a lot of people have said to me after our lunches, we had Eddie Jones, for example. Sir Clive Woodward is another one, where people have said, you see them making notes whilst they're talking, and they're not making notes about, oh, that's a funny story. They're making notes about a great point that they've just made. And very often I get people saying to me, he may be the manager of England, or he may be this, whatever, but he'd be just as good as an MD or CEO of any company. And that's the point. That's what these people can do. It's the same attributes, it's the same ingredients required to do that. So let's just look at some of these characters I've met. I'm going to name drop a bit here. Forgive me for doing so, but only to get across some points about how you go about you go about your business. And the one thing that they all have beyond anything else is, even when everybody else has written them off, the media, the public, their support groups, they maintain belief, and they maintain persistence and determination. There are so many stories in sport of overnight successes, like a 15-year overnight success. But they keep at it, they keep at it. I'm a great quotes man, as in I love lots of quotes. I use them all the time. And you may know this one. It's one I have pinned up on my wall, and it comes from Ray Kroc, who was the American tycoon, the fast food tycoon, who took over McDonald's from a local 6-franchise unit into the global monster that it became. And this is his quote. He's a man of quotes, but this is one of his better known ones. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful individuals with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And I absolutely love that quote, because sport is riddled with people who have achieved more than the person next to them, and yet possessed less talent, less of a skill set. What they've managed to do is squeeze every last drop that they have of their talent to get to where they have, whereas others should have achieved more, but they haven't applied their talent. They haven't persisted. They've sat back expecting their talent to be enough. And I give you examples of those who have, when I say failed, obviously they've all done well, but they haven't got close to maximising what they could have done. Danny Cipriani is a perfect example of that. He's a man who should have been the England number 10 for many, many, many years. Incredible talent. I think most people in rugby would say the most talented fly half, standoff number 10 in English rugby for the last 20 years. He's going to end his career with 8 caps, 10 caps. What a waste of an amazing talent that is. Even so, like Mark Waugh, when I played cricket with the Australians, the two brothers, Steve Waugh and Mark Waugh, great example. Mark Waugh, 10 times more talented than Steve Waugh, but Steve Waugh achieved so much more because Steve Waugh achieved every last drop out of what talent he had. You know, he would rather die than give his wicket up. Whereas Mark Waugh, I mean, fair play, good luck to him. He enjoyed life a bit, and it affected his cricket. He had a great career, don't get me wrong. But anybody in cricket will tell you, Mark Waugh should have been one of the all-time greats, up there with Sachin Tendulkar and Jacques Kallis and Ricky Ponting. But he wasn't. Those who have succeeded, have become very, very single-minded. I remember it's quite depressing actually for all of us. It was a late February on a Sunday night in Rotterdam. There was sleet everywhere, and I was interviewing Tim Henman. And Tim had got married, had got kids, and everybody was saying he's on his way down. And there he was, plugging away, still on the European circuit. It was cold. There was nobody else in the stadium, just the two of us in the bowels of the stadium. And this is a man, of course, who famously 4 times reached the Wimbledon semi-final without ever progressing. He never, in fact, made a majors final at all, never won a major, was ranked number 4 in the world, made a lot of money. Famously, if you remember, I think it was 91, had Goran Ivanisevic on the ropes, and then the rain came, and the next morning, Goran came and finished him off. But what I found so interesting about Tim, I've never heard anybody say this to me before, I have since. He said to me, you know what? What people have got to realise, people think I've failed because I've not won a major, not reached the Wimbledon final. Every year I put the British public through the mangle, and then I fall at the final hurdle or the penultimate hurdle. He said, what people have got to realise is that I've come to terms with it because I know I've achieved everything that I can. I'm this good. I'm not better. So I've managed to squeeze what talent I have out of it, and I can live with that. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life beating myself up because I was never Wimbledon champion. And that was a really, really interesting take that I had. Nick Faldo, one of the most unpopular golfers that there was when he was in his heyday. And the reason why, he was in his own tunnel, absolute tunnel vision, totally focused on what he did to the detriment of relationships, well, both personal and also professional. But for a sort of 5-year period, he was the best in the world. You could say the same about Steve Davis in snooker. Similar thing. Barely spoke to anybody else, wasn't particularly popular. They've all become popular since, when they've kind of won everything, mellowed, lightened up, become human beings. But guess what? They're not winning anymore. So it's interesting how by taking that very single-minded approach, that's how they've done it. One of my all-time heroes I know very, very well is Sir Steve Redgrave. I think he's obviously one of the greatest Olympians this country's produced. I think he could be the greatest Olympian. And I'll tell you an anecdote I'll tell you a few anecdotes actually, but the first one is we had him for one of our lunches. And one of my members said, I know he's great and everything, but I'm not really into rowing. And I said, okay, no, that's fine, but just hear me out with this one, please. You're talking about a man who won 5 Olympic gold medals in back-to-back Olympics over a 20-year period. He was 40 years old when he won his last one, in one of the most grueling and physical sports that you can play. And by the way, he earned hardly any money for doing it. And this guy was saying, yeah, I know that, but, I said, no, I'm not finished. This is the bit you've got to listen to. For most of that period of time, he had Crohn's disease. I hope nobody here has Crohn's disease, but if you know about it, it's not pleasant. Colitis and type A diabetes. So those are 3 incredibly debilitating conditions that you can have. And he had all 3 of them at the same time, and yet won 5 Olympic gold medals. And I said to this member, I said, so what does that tell you? I'll tell you what it tells you. Number one, he's built up a no excuses environment. No CEO, I'm sure none of you want to hear the reasons why somebody who works for you has failed to do what they're supposed to do. Not interested. And so Steve has built up a no excuses environment. No excuses. Even although he had really good excuses, wasn't interested. Number 2 is a serial winner. And number 3, that whatever it took to win, he did it. I didn't realise this at the time, and I was there in Sydney at the 2000 Olympics, but he told me much, much later that in the boat, he had a massive sugar lump, which was below the surface of the boat, so you couldn't see it unless the camera, moved in above them. He had a massive sugar lump just in case he had a bit of it was like a sort of a portable insulin for him. So those are the levels that he was at just to try and win. And he used to make me laugh. When you speak to a winner in sport, and I guess it's the same for you guys as well. I don't want to call myself a winner, but trust me, when I have the odd failings, and I've had a few recently with this brave new world of tech, I beat myself up big time. And the sports stars, they don't remember their wins, but they sure as hell remember their defeats. Big time. I mean, to the point where it's ridiculous. Again, Steve Redgrave. He was moaning about Matthew Pinson in a nice way, saying, obviously his long-term partner, saying, problem with that guy, that he doesn't know what it's like to lose. And I sort of spat my coffee out and I said, lose? What do you know about losing? And I went through, 5 Olympics, 10 World Championships. And he went, oh yeah, I know what it's like to losing. And then he brought up a story. It was like when he was 18 years old at the Henley Regatta. And this conversation took place when he was about 36. And he was at the Henley Regatta and he wanted to be a sculler. And for those of you who don't know, a sculler is a guy who's got 2 oars at the same time. Later on, he had the one big oar. And he fancied himself as a sculler. So he was in this final at Henley, and he's a big, big beast, too big really to be a sculler. And he was against this Norwegian guy, and he shot out into a huge lead. And then the Norwegian guy's technique was a lot better. And in the final third, the Norwegian guy shot past him. And as he did so, he shouted out, sculling is for top oarsmen, rowing is for apes. And went on to win. And Steve Redgrave, 18 years on, 5 Olympic gold medals, 9 World Championships, never forgot it. I give you another example. Sir Ben Ainsley, another guy I've got massive respect for. 4 Olympic gold medals. Just him, by the way, not with anybody else, just him. Absolutely, if you meet the guy off a boat, the most mild-mannered, almost quiet individual. On a boat, he's an absolute animal. Absolute animal. But in his first Olympics, he won 4 golds, but prior to that, he won a silver at the age of 19 in 1996, which was the Atlanta Olympics. It was just off the Georgian coast in Savannah. And he was taking on the Sir Ben Ainsley of the era, a guy from Brazil called, unfortunately, Robert Scheidt. It was spelled S-C-H-E-I-D-T, just in case you're wondering. But unfortunately, it was pronounced that way. And he was the Ben Ainsley of the time. As this 19-year-old kid nobody had ever heard of called Ben Ainsley. And he won a silver, he just missed out on gold. And to this day, it bugs him. To this day, despite the fact he's gone on to win 4 gold medals, despite the fact that he turned the America's Cup from defeat into victory, if you remember, when he was brought on by the Americans, they were 8-1 down and then won 9-8. Absolute superstar. All he remembers is his defeat. And by the way, Steve Redgrave, okay, he won 5 Olympic gold medals. He actually won 6 Olympic medals. I wouldn't mention that to him if I were you, because the 6th one was a bronze medal. And I'll tell you why it was. It was the Seoul Olympics. He won gold on the Saturday in the Coxless pairs, him and Andy Holmes. And then the very next day, he was in the Cox pairs final. And they came third to the Abagnale brothers, who were the famous Italians. So we're back-to-back finals in 2 days, and he got a bronze. As far as he's concerned, that's been erased from his memory bank. So the bronze medal at the Olympics is abject failure if you're Steve Redgrave. And I love that, because for many, many years, especially the Brits, before the national lottery came in, it was plucky us and brave this and whatever. And isn't it great that we came 4th? And the mentality now, say, with the Team GB Olympic team, which of course is so many sports, is 4th or 3rd or 2nd is not enough. You may or may not remember, we had the, I'm trying to think what her name was, it'll come back to me, the BMX rider, who was the girl who was really good, favourite to win the gold. And she was lying in 2nd place and coming around the final bend in London. And she decided to do a move which probably had a 1 in 10 chance of working. If it worked, she'd win. If it didn't work, she'd be out. But she took it and she crashed and she ended up with nothing. But it was, for her, it was gold or nothing. It was winning or nothing. 2nd wasn't winning. Second was you're top of the losers. And I love that change of mentality that there's been in British sport. And it's no wonder, you know, that we are now so much better in so many sports that we had no right to be good at. I mean, for goodness sake, we're winning Tour de France's for fun. You know, we're winning Davis Cups. You know, we never won stuff like that. And this is the change mentality. But it's all mentality. It's all mindset. It's got nothing to do with we've got better players, or if we do have better players, they're better because of their mindset. And it's also the learning how to fail, I think, is really important. We've all failed, I'm sure. I can't believe there's anybody listening into this who's not failed at some point in their life. If they say they've never failed, then I would humbly suggest they're perhaps being a little bit dishonest with themselves. We all know what it's like to fail, and it's almost a prerequisite to succeed. Nick Fowler, again, came out with this quote saying, basically, to succeed, you need to fail. You fail, you learn, you win. And there's countless examples of people failing. Let me give you an example. I think you had Matt Dawson up there yourself the other day. Matt and Johnny Wilkinson were part of the 1998 England rugby tour to Australia. It was very much a makeshift team. It was a junior team. They called it the Tour of Hell because they got absolutely thumped by everybody. And the worst experience was they lost 76-0 to Australia. Can you imagine that? 76-0 to Australia. Now, there were quite a few people on that tour, players for England, who became one-cap wonders. You never saw them again. But Johnny, he came back inspired by that, inspired by the beating of his life. Because he realised, and don't forget, this is 1998, this is 5 years before the 2003 World Cup and his famous drop goal. He realised that's where the bar is. And that's where he has to aspire to. And he came back not disillusioned, demotivated, the exact opposite, absolutely motivated to the hill to do that. And Matt was captain of that tour. And what he tried to say to his players is, look, everybody's written us off. You know, we're playing against a team that's got, 800 caps. We've got 100 between us, right? This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to stand up in adversity and prove what you can do. Now, many didn't, and which is why you didn't really see them again as part of the England team. But some did, and they went on to achieve greatness. So I love those sort of stories, the fact that people fail, but then they go on to succeed. The other thing is, I love it when people don't accept failure at all. Let me go back to Steve Redgrave. I always remember this. I'll never forget it. So when I went to write my book, I went to see him to give him the idea of me joining him and his team for a week at Henley, doing everything that they did. It was sheer hell, by the way. Blisters everywhere. Blisters on places you don't want to know. I was a toy for them to play with. But I said to them, this is what I want to do. And you could see him smirking and thinking, this is going to be fun. This is going to be hell for Ian, but we'll do it. And right at the end, I said to him, because I knew him, I said, Steve, just one thing. And I kind of said it as a joke. I said, you and I are going to enter the Henley Regatta at the end of the week as a pair, okay, to try and win the silver goblets. You just have to be aware that it's you and me. And I'll do everything I can, Steve, everything I can. But you have to be prepared for the fact that we're probably not going to win. And I remember he had a drink in his hand, a glass. He thumped it down quite dramatically onto the table, looked at me, fixed me with a steely glare and said, I don't see why not. And he absolutely meant it. I don't see why we can't win the Henley Regatta. And of course I'm thinking, well, because I'm in the boat. But no, he wouldn't have it. He still thought that we should win. And when we finished and we didn't win, I was really happy because it had been the perfect race. I kept in sync with him. I didn't catch a crab, which means that you get the oar stuck in the water and the whole motion goes. I thought I did really, really well. And I said to him as we're still in the boat, so Steve, coach, give me a verdict. Don't hold back. He went, don't hold back? I said, yeah. He said, to be honest with you, Ian, it would have made no difference to our speed whether you'd been rowing or not. So, which of course, when you write in a book, that's what you want to hear. You know, this is why he's Steve Redgrave, and this is why I do what I do. you know, and I kind of loved that, and I got that. I got that completely. And he wasn't particularly happy with the fact that we hadn't won. So the next thing I wanted to get into is attention to detail, because again, marginal gains. Clive Woodward uses a lot. Dave Brailsford uses it a lot. It's not about getting one thing 100% better. It's about getting 100 things 1% better. And you think, one thing, is it going to make a difference? Let me give you a statistic, which I think is absolutely astonishing. 2004 Olympics in Athens. 5 Olympic gold medals. Team GB, I think, won 9. But let me remind you of 5. Kelly Holmes won 2. One of the 1500 metres, one of the 800 metres. The 4x100 metres boys won the relay sprint. Chris Hoy won the kilo, which is 4 laps around the velodrome. And by the way, was the last to go, and two before broke the world record. And then the one before broke the world record that had just been broken. And then Chris Hoy went out and broke both world records to win gold. Talk about performing when it matters. So anyway, so it's the 2 from Kelly Holmes, the 4x100 metres boys, Chris Hoy, and the Coxlers 4s without Steve Redgrave, but it was Matt Pinson and James Cracknell in it. 5 gold medals. If you combine the winning margins of those 5 gold medals, it comes to under 1 second. It comes to under 1 second for 5 Olympic gold medals. And I can tell you, that's not luck. That's not coincidence. It might be one thing, but they did something different and something better than the opposition. So I'm hoping everything I've said so far, these aren't purely sporty points. These are life points. These are business points. There's an iconic photo, you may remember it, of Daley Thompson. As you know, when they do the decathlon, it's a killer. 5 events on day 1, 5 events on day 2, always finishes with the 1500 meters, which is a terrible event to do when you've done 9 events before. And Daley wasn't great at it, but he was so far ahead, it didn't matter. And there's this iconic photo at the end where traditionally everybody collapses on the floor at the end of the 1500 meters, and Daley's standing above them. Rather like the Cassius Clay standing over Sonny Liston poster, standing, the only one standing, last man standing. And of course, the message was, you can't beat me. I'm still standing after all this, and you're all on the floor. And Daley used to train on Christmas Day. Famously used to train on Christmas Day. He had a great rival called Jürgen Hinksmann, who was German, West German at the time. And he used to say, Daley, why did you train on Christmas Day? Would it really make any difference? And he said, physically, no, he said. But Jürgen knew I trained more than him. And I even trained on Christmas Day. So mentally, I had the edge on him, and mentally, he knew I had the edge on him as well. So that's the extent that these sports stars want to do. It really is attention to detail as well that gets them to where they are. And it's learning from their failures. It's learning from others. It's persisting even when they keep failing. And it's also harnessing their talent with everything else. Again, going back to Steve Redgrave, by the 2000 Olympics, which was his 5th Olympic gold medal, anybody who knows anything about a rowing will tell you, Matt Pinson was sort of the strongest. Tim Foster, who looked like a student, was the aesthetically pleasing. He was like the purest. James Cracknell was the most sort of intense. And Redgrave was in many ways the weakest. He was the old man. But they all said he was the best of the lot still, because he had everything. And the main thing was his mentality. And I've been in the Leander, which is the rowing club, in January, with 3.5 years to go before the next Olympics. There's ice on the water. And I've seen Steve Redgrave get off the ergo, you know, the rowing machine, after a really, really hard session. And actually, when I say get off, not get off, fall off, because he can't move. And he lies in a fetal position, shouting in agony until the lactic acids dissipated. And I remember saying to Steve, you know, mate, it's 3.5 years away. And he said, it's called putting money in the bank. Put the money in the bank, because at the Olympics, I'm going to be withdrawing it. And I just love seeing that sort of thing happen. It's so inspiring. for you to carry on. And really, there shouldn't be any excuses. You shouldn't be looking for excuses to fail. When you fail, we all do it. We learn, and we make sure we don't do it again. So I could go on and on and on about the various other sports stars. They're all the same animal. That's the point. All of them are the same animal. Jamshid Khan, you may remember, was Jahangir Khan and Jamshid Khan were world squash champions. Jamshid used to train until his hands bled. Johnny Wilkinson, let's return to Johnny. We're talking about getting it right. Johnny used to have a training session where he used to kick 30 goals, some of them in front of the posts, many of them at angles. And he had to kick all 30. If he missed one, he'd go back to the beginning. So he might have kicked 28 in a row, but he had to get to 30. And he didn't cheat. He'd get them right in the corner, right on the touchline, at distance. If he got the 29 and he missed one, he'd go back to the beginning again. And all that pays dividends when you've got 26 seconds left of a Rugby World Cup final and you're in position and you know you can win the Rugby World Cup if you just get this drop kick over. On the practice ground, not that difficult. The whole world watching, knowing this is for the Rugby World Cup. And that's where that practice, getting it right pays dividends. What's the famous Gary Player quote? Do you remember? We all know it, don't we? When he chipped in for about the third time in a row and his opponent said, God, you're so lucky. It's been attributed to a lot of people, but Gary Player was the original one. He goes, yeah, you're right, he said. And you know what? The funny thing is, the more I practice, the luckier I get. And it's absolutely true. Now, I'm aware that I have been talking for 30 minutes. I could go on. I think the main points are, it's not talent enough, obviously, in skill set. It's perseverance, it's determination, and it's absolute mindset. You may not be as good as the next person, but you may achieve more by being, remember the Ray Kroc quote, be persistent, be determined, don't give up. You'll fail, we all will, but that will help you succeed. Be a stickler for detail. Marginal gains are massively important. Tiny things, maybe individually may not make a difference, but collectively make all the difference in the world. Never forget when you went wrong. None of these top sports stars have. They still beat themselves up about it, and that's why they're the best. The world, and certainly the world of sport, is full of wasted talent. It's a dreadful shame if you go to your deathbed knowing that you've blown it. If you know you've done everything you can, then that's great. I'll leave with one Jack Nicklaus. I've got lots of anecdotes as well, but if you want some funny anecdotes, I've got loads of those, most of which are me being an idiot, making an idiot of myself in front of these people. But Jack Nicklaus, as you know, I'm sure, has won more golf majors than anybody else in the history of golf. And it's going to be a long time. Tiger was getting that way, but then obviously it all went a bit pear-shaped with Tiger. He won 18 majors. But here's a fact that you might not know, which I think is incredible. He won 18 majors. He came second in 19 more majors. Second runner-up in 19 more majors. And in total, he had 56 top 5 finishes in majors. 56. And I was fortunate enough to spend an afternoon with him, walking one of his golf courses in Georgia, in America. And then I had an hour with him in the locker room. And he asked me, did I think he'd failed? This is Jack Nicklaus. Well, no, Jack. No, you are the greatest golfer of all time. He goes, yeah, but I was runner-up 19 times. I was in the top 5, 52 times, etc. He said, the reason why I did it, he said, I have regrets and I don't have regrets. I gave a lot of time to my family as well. I'm a big family man. And I absolutely sacrificed what I could have achieved in golf. And in that sense, I don't regret it. But I do regret it because I should have won 30 majors. So even Jack Nicklaus beats himself up about how he sees himself as failing as a golfer, which I think is extraordinary. And that's why I love hanging out with the very best sports stars. I'll throw in one more very quickly. Michael Schumacher, another one.
I knew you wouldn't stop.
Another one. I will stop after this, but this is a good one. Michael Schumacher, I mean, you know, Oh dear, talk about sliding doors in life. But anyway, I wrote a motor racing book, got to know all the drivers past and present, and it was called Who Do You Think You Are, Michael Schumacher, because that's the kind of thing police say. And it ended up with me racing Michael Schumacher at the Stade de France in a thing called the Race of Champions, 80,000 people there. It wasn't a head-to-head, it was like a time trial thing. So I raced first when it was raining, and then about an hour later, Michael did the same thing in the same car when it wasn't raining. And guess what? Michael was quicker. But I said to him, in jest, but we've done the sums, and with you not having the rain, it being dry, and me having the rain, actually, it's a draw. And this is just a bit of fun. And Michael Schumacher said, 9. No way. I beat you. I beat you fair and square. That's what it's going to say. That's all that matters. And there was a twinkle in his eye, but he was not accepting, even though it was completely unimportant that that was the case. And again, I just thought, and that's why you have won 7 world titles. Anyway, I will stop now before people start hanging themselves from that scene in Airplane. Back to you, Gary.
Ian, sir, thank you very much. I absolutely love that. Again, loads and loads of notes. Could you explain the top 6 inches? Because it was the first thing you said. Okay, right. So what? Your brain.
It's the head.
Okay.
It's the head. It's your brain.
Okay.
It's your brain. Simple
Right.
as that. Don't
Brilliant,
get confused with anything else, for goodness sake.
I had other shit going on. And perseverance is omnipotent is brilliant. I wrote all these notes, so I'm gonna enjoy that. But I think there's gonna be lots of questions for you. But I'm gonna take advantage of having the first one.
Go for it.
Do you think the absolute best of the best of the best of the best of the best are driven by fear of failure or the joy of winning?
No, it's never the enjoyment of winning. It's never the enjoyment of winning. Do you know what? It's a relief. When they win, it's a relief. It's a question I've asked many times. What's your overrunning emotion? Joy, pride, whatever? No, relief. Relief. It's rather like, you're trying to scale a mountain. You speak to a mountaineer. When you get to a mountain, like, well, okay, so now what am I going to do? I remember Linford Christie. I'm sorry, I do know all these people, so I'm not a name dropper. As I said to Sean Connery the other day, I'm not a name dropper, okay? I remember Linford Christie, took years and years and years to be Olympic champion. And then he finally won it in 1992. And actually, I remember, just to digress a little bit, I was seated in the stand right on the finish line. And the cameras had showed all the runners. And there was a guy, I forgot his name, was Calvin somebody, I think. He was American. And he was by far the fastest sprinter in the world, had the world record. And the camera shot to him, and his eyes were all over the place, furtive, dancing all over the place. And then the camera shot to Linford Christie. Absolute tunnel vision. You could have dropped a grenade next to him, you wouldn't have noticed. And I remember saying to the people around me, Linford's going to win this. And by the way, I'm not always right. I'm very often wrong. But I'd said he's going to win this. How can you say that? He's, 0.3 of a second behind this guy's time. It's got nothing to do with times. It's about performing on the day. And I just said, look at the two of them. One of them's, crapping themselves. The other one's saying, this is my time. And there's a big difference between being the best on any day and being the best when it matters. Performance sports people. So when he won the gold, to get back to my point, he said it was just relief. It was almost a letdown. It was almost as if it's about the journey, about the getting there rather than the being there.
It's a brilliant answer. In sales training, they talk about don't be scared to fail, and I totally get that. But I've lived my whole life being absolutely shit scared for not performing at my best, and that's made me get up early, try harder, work later, work weekends and stuff. It's interesting. Can I throw this out to the group? Otherwise, I will monopolise this. If you have a question, ping yourself off mute and ask the lovely Ian. Right, I was taking over. Brilliant. Okay, I thought Wade would have a question about Man United. So why Man United so shit? Right, so Clive Woodward obviously took over the Team GB for the Olympics. And I know it's about marginal gains. How was that perceived? So a new guy comes in, fresh ideas, everyone's got their own coaches, and there are coaches for certain sports. Life and Boy comes in, so we're going to change everything. Did you know? Did it go down well? Was there pushback? How do things like that happen in the business, in the GB?
Yeah, it was an interesting exercise. The reason why I was brought in is because Colin Moynihan was the minister of sport and became the chairman of the BOA, British Olympic Association. He's a guy, remember, who was very small. What's his name? Dennis Skinner in the Houses of Parliament used to call him the miniature for sport. So he brought in Clive Woodward because that was Colin. He'd like to be high profile, and we're the best, so we're going to bring the best, etc. And you've touched upon a really interesting point there, because Clive came in and, British cycling was smashing it. British rowing was smashing it. British sailing, to a degree, was smashing it. And he kind of went to these sports, and these sports said, we're okay, thanks. We're fine. So he went around trying to find sports which weren't doing particularly well, and got himself inveigled in that. But I don't sound like this is a criticism of Clive, because I remember sitting next to him in the velodrome in Beijing. You may not remember, the British cycling absolutely smashed the cycling in Beijing. Chris Hoy won 3. It was all that great era, and Vicky Pendleton and Bradley Wiggins, and they're just winning golds for fun. And I remember sitting next to Clive, and Clive had turned into a fan, and he was making notes, and he was saying, going back to my point, he said, I've only worked in rugby up to this point, and suddenly I can completely equate Bradley Wiggins or Chris Hoy or Steve Redgrave to Martin Johnson, Johnny Wilkinson, Lawrence Dallaglio. They are the same animal. So in the end, his effect wasn't as big as he probably thought it was going to be, and probably the BOA thought as well, because he added a bit here and there, obviously, again, the odd marginal gain. But people like Dave Brailsford, now Sir Dave Brailsford, who ran British cycling, and you're not going to rock up and tell Chris Hoy either A, how to ride a bike, or B, how to get it right mentally. So it's quite interesting. I think Clive walked into the room, expected to address the room, and ended up actually sitting down as a pupil.
So that all hail Dave Brailsford then, because he's obviously the man. It's quite interesting.
Mind you, there's a nice little anecdote as well, which if you speak to, well, Matt Dawson will probably tell you this, but what Clive was good at was getting a good team together, getting a great team together. I don't just mean on the pitch, I mean off the pitch as well. That's what he's really good at. But this is, I was there writing about it. I was very lucky to have witnessed these things. So it's the 2003 Rugby World Cup final. And as you may remember, Elton Flatley, the Australian number 10, kicks a penalty in the 80th minute. By the way, what nerve to do that, to bring it into extra time. At which point, the England team were in a huddle, and Clive runs down from the stands with his clipboard to address them. And he got to about 5 feet of the huddle, and Martin Johnson's head suddenly reared up and just said, we're on it. It was a kind of way of saying, don't interrupt us, we're on this. And so Clive actually had nobody to talk to apart from Johnny, who, surprise, was practicing kicks. But there's an example of where in the end, so if you're a successful CEO, and I'm learning, by the way, I've become a grown-up in the last 2 years. I was having a gas for most of my adult life. The best CEOs, need to listen and need to have faith and support in the team around them. And Clive, to his credit, got the message, understood, and let Martin Johnson and others, because it was a team of leaders, go on and win that Rugby World Cup.
That's brilliant. Anybody else? Because I've got a couple.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Hi, Si.
Hi.
Oh, that's the Mr. Simon Noakes, is it not?
Hi, Ian. How are you, sir? All right.
Very well, thank you.
Good. I'm keen to ask Danny Cipriani, just to touch on real talented people that have clearly failed. In hindsight, has he ever said to you or mentioned to you why he failed? Was it leadership? Was it direction? Was it him? Because obviously we come across talented people that don't perform. And what is it that couldn't get it right for him?
Well, very few of them. Well, he's had a good time, but very few of them admit it ever. Some do when they, get older and wiser, but very, very few of them. So the problem with Danny was, he's a good-looking boy. He's in London. It may not have happened if he'd been playing for, Gloucester or even Leicester, where they're a little bit more sort of hardened. But he had the bright lights of London, good-looking boy. He got involved with the wrong people, the wrong agents. He became started going out with wrong celebrity people, being photographed, and he believed it in all. And I've had a number of conversations with him. And if you met him, I'm talking about 10 years ago. If you met him 10 years ago, one-on-one, you'd think, what a great guy, what a really nice guy. I really like that bloke. And I believe him when he says he wants to do this, he wants to do that. And then you pick up the paper the week later and he's missed England training because he got pissed the night before. And you put your head in your hands and think, what are you doing? So Danny at the time was kind of, he saw himself as the victim. And I think we've all got to do this. We've got to start with ourselves, haven't we? We've got to start with ourselves before we start asking what other people are doing or not doing. And that's been the problem with Danny. Others kind of accept it. Ernie Els is a good example. For those of you into your golf, I know you are, Simon. At the time, you remember for a while, Ernie Els was Tiger Woods' greatest rival when Tiger was absolutely ripping it up. And Ernie won a few majors and got loads of seconds. And he was criticised because he liked to have he was a typical South African, liked a beer, liked a barbie, and wasn't as anal as Tiger was at the time for his practice. But he said, well, I accept that, and that's how I am. That's just how I am. In fact, he argued if he was as anal as Tiger, he might not be as good. So some people accept it, but a few are in denial of it. And then unfortunately for them, as I said earlier, none of us want to, when I'm on my deathbed, I may not be happy, but I hope at least I feel as if I've squeezed every last drop out of what life has given me the opportunity to do. Probably won't, but I want to give it a good go. If you could say that to yourself, God willing, in 40 years' time, you're not going to be happy, but you're going to be a lot happier than you're lying there realizing, my God, what an opportunity I've blown.
Can I just share something on that note? Jimenez is my favourite sports person. He's having the best time of his life. He's doing whatever he wants. He's winning enough. He's made his money. He drives Ferraris everywhere he goes. Do you know what? You've got to enjoy the journey, and whatever happens at the end, it's.
Well, here's the thing, and it's a choice you've got to make. Now, Johnny Wilkinson didn't enjoy his journey. He beat himself up. He did not enjoy the journey. And when you succeed, your emotion is relief, Gary. It's relief. It's not joy. It's not pride. It's not let's celebrate. Of course, they all celebrate it, but you know what I mean. It's just always okay. That's done now. What are we going to do now? If I could just quickly tell you, because I've just reminded of this, the ridiculousness of the winner. Okay, I used to write a series of participatory columns for Esquire magazine on the back of these books, and I did all sorts of things, not just sport. I was Gordon Ramsay's sous chef. I was a Virgin Radio disc jockey. I walked to the North Pole with David Hempelman Adams. I did all sorts. I did stand-up comedy at the Edinburgh Festival. Did all sorts of things. I had a game of tennis against Bjorn Borg, and this was. I don't know, maybe 20 years. Bjorn was in his early 40s. So he obviously wasn't the Bjorn Borg of the late 70s, but it was still Bjorn Borg. Trust me, he could play. And he was in good nick. I didn't know whether to play him or lick his face, to be honest. He was such a good-looking boy still. But now I was playing against him. And I had Peter Fleming, who you may remember was John McEnroe's doubles partner. And he coached me a couple of days before. And he said to me, Ian, if you're just going to hit the ball over the net to him, you won't win a point. Go for winners. You'll lose most of them, but how good are you going to feel if you hit a winner past Bjorn Borg? I said, okay, you're right. So we had this game at Queen's Club, and he won the first set on my serve, and then I was receiving his serve, and then some sort of out of body thing happened to me. As if I suddenly morphed for 3 shots into John McEnroe, because I hit literally eyes closed, back arching back, all the power I could have. I put 3 straight winners past Bjorn Borg, and he's diving for them. And he must be thinking, my God, what's happened to this guy? And then I got a bit full of myself, and I approached the net, and he lobbed me. And when you play tennis, it's just the two of you. You always have the arguments about, was it out or not? I'm not sure. Was it out or not? So it looked out, and I should have just said, it's out. I would have won the game. But he said, was it out? And I said, I think so, Bjorn. I'm not entirely sure. He goes, we play again. And this is Bjorn Borg playing me at Queen's Club. And I said, I think it was out, Bjorn, but I wouldn't, want to put my house on it. He goes, we play again. He won the next few points. Of course, he won 6-love. And I just thought he wasn't even prepared to give me that point, which I love. I love that. You don't want to be patronised, And I think that's another example of the extremes that these people go.
Anybody else?
I've got one question. I googled you last night and saw a video similar to what you're just talking about there, Ian. I think you were wrestling with.
Yes.
You were doing the 60-meter sprint, then you did some armchair, wheelchair thing, and then you got battered by rugby players on a pitch.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Well, anybody who plays sport, if you're so that the rugby team were Llanelli, and anybody, if you play for a local Welsh rugby team, you do anything to train with Llanelli, number one. With the wrestling, it was one of my chapters in my second book. So my first book, Playgrounds of the Gods, was the one with fighting Roy Jones Jr. and running with the Kenyans and all that. But the second book was the British version, and I became a professional wrestler. And you may or may not have seen, but my tag team partner was Pat Bomber Roach from Alvina's Aim Pet, the bald guy who got chopped to bits by the propeller in Indiana Jones. So we were the goodies, and the other two, Dick the Bruiser from Sheppey, so that was intimidating enough. He was bald with a pigtail, and Pretty Boy Stewart. And it was, the point is, they're not supposed to be stunts. It's not gonna work if it's a stunt, and it's not gonna work if I'm trying to make it funny. It is funny, but it's only funny because I'm doing my best to do that. And it's also more plausible, more believable. And oddly enough, doing all that participatory stuff that you saw me do, and loads more, even though it's hard to believe I was a good sportsman, judging by those things. I was a good sportsman, but when it's one thing being the best in your school, I was always the second best, actually. I'm never the best, the second best in your school team and playing county at under 15 and under 16. And then you go into that arena and you're totally exposed. So I did it. A lot of people thought I was mad because, I mean, never mind the wrestling. Roy Jones put 12 stitches in my face, by the way. It was horrendous. But it made the book. I won an award for it. And people aren't stupid. You have to make it for real. And oddly enough, getting beaten up by Roy Jones was a really creative experience for me. I wrote a 12,000 word chapter, 12,000 words in a day on that chapter. The words couldn't come out of me quickly enough because I experienced every imaginable emotion that there was, including fear, by the way. I mean, real fear. My God, this is awful. This is horrendous. This is like having a slab of concrete shoved in my face. And people always say it's dangerous to fight a boxer 3 weeks before a world title fight because they're in the zone. But it got me a lot of respect in sport. Oddly enough, when I ran the 60 meters, as you said, and thank you for saying sprint.
I would recommend anyone seeing that because they're crossing the finish line and it doesn't look like you've started.
Yeah. All right. And actually, it looks like somebody's pressed fast forward on the video player for 7 of the 8 athletes. But the reason why we did that, and the reason why Alan Pascoe, who was the meet organizer, thought it was a great idea, nobody else did, but he did because he's a visionary. He said, when you watch 8 sprinters run the 60 meters, you think, oh, okay, yeah, they must be quite fast. When you watch 7, and by the way, guys, I didn't just rock up. I trained for 2 weeks with all the top British sprinters at the time, the Dwayne Chambers and the Jason Gardners and all that. I did proper training. When you see 7 world-class sprinters, there are 2 Olympic gold medals in that field, and 1 ordinary Joe, that really underlines how good they are, how fast they are. In my defense, I would like to say there's a reaction time, which is the time between the gun going and your heel leaving the blocks. Okay, there were 2 semi-finals, 8 athletes each. I was in the first one. I was the 5th fastest reaction time. So if there was an Olympic 1 meter sprint, I'd be world class. But
let's go for great questions, Spence. Let's go for just 2 more, and then we'll release you, buddy. Wayne, did you have one?
Yeah, Ian, that was absolutely brilliant, by the way. I could listen to your stories all day. Absolutely superb.
Thanks, Wayne.
So
Cheers.
You've talked about sports stars being highly talented, but what about the coaches? Who's the best coach that you've seen, you've interviewed, and why?
Yeah, it's funny, because there are exceptions, but some of the top coaches were not top sports stars. That's interesting, isn't it?
Mourinho.
Mourinho being a great example. Arsene Wenger was no great shakes as a footballer, and even Fergie wasn't. Yeah. It was all right, but he was nothing great. And sports is riddled with most of the great coaches. You'd think a great player would immediately get all the respect from the. Roy Keane's a good example of not being a great coach because his standards were so high as a player. He expects them to be equaled by everybody who coaches, and obviously coaching is a very different set of skills to playing. It's, for a start, man management is crucial, absolutely crucial to coaching. So in terms of coaching, Clive Woodward to an extent in terms of getting the best team together. I wouldn't necessarily call him a coach, more manager. Dave Brailsford similarly got everything together in place for people to achieve the great things. Fergie, obviously, the greatest Premiership manager there will ever be. Nobody's going to get close to what he achieves. But interestingly enough, there's a great quote from Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi was the Green Bay Packers coach in the 60s, king of the soundbites. You go to any gym and you see motivational messages. You can bet your life that one of them is from Lombardi. And Lombardi did make the point that behind every great coach, there's always a great team. So being a great coach, you speak to Sam Allardyce or Harry Redknapp, and they've got a real bee in the bonnet about this. And they'll say, yeah, Pep Guardiola is a great coach. Yeah, Jurgen Klopp's a great coach. But it'd be really interesting to see how they would do at Barnsley or Swindon or whatever. And it's a really interesting point, isn't it? It would be that. Would they improve the clubs? Absolutely. But would they turn them into anything even remotely close to the clubs they're at now? Almost certainly not, no. So, I'd have to think about it a little bit more now because you put me on the spot. I've interviewed a lot more sports stars than coaches. I tell you, if you're into your boxing, somebody who was fantastic was Brendan Ingle, based in Sheffield. He produced Johnny Nelson, Nazim Hamed, Kell Brook, Harold Graham, and it was a haven, probably the roughest part of Sheffield. It was a little haven for people to escape from the streets. So I think he produced 9 world champions. Tiny little gym, 1 ring, just in it was like a village hall where you used to play table tennis as a kid, where you used to have village hall parties. You remember when you bought your bottle of woodpecker and hoped you might get off with with Claire from the 6th form. It was like one of those sort of places.
I don't know where he's gone. I don't know where. Literally, he's gone. Is it Till?
maybe I've revealed too much about myself, but it was like that, and yet he produced nine world champions. Example's a great thing. If you can see it happening, it's just how the Kenyans became such great runners. Yes, of course, high altitude helped, but to see one of them return. A farmer returned with a Mercedes that just won in Stockholm. And they thought, well, if you can do that, I can do that as well. Which is why the Khan family, the great Khan family in Pakistan, produced 8 world champions from one family. Because they didn't have, it's why the Brazilians, by the way, produced such great footballers. They don't have, they're not like English cricketers who, public school and have, should I become a doctor or should I become a cricketer? A lot of these people have got no choice. And when you have, it's adversity or give this a go, you give it a go. And so a lot of these people, the Brazilian footballers, the Kenyan runners, the Pakistani squash players, you see the boxers are great to interview, especially the American boxers, because almost all the American boxers, Sugar Ray Leonard, Bernard Hopkins, they've all got stories of, drug addict fathers, brothers being shot in the ghetto, etc., etc. So sport is for some the only escape route that they can get, and they take it.
Buddy, you've just made me laugh thinking of Freddie Flintoff as a doctor. There's a surgery.
I'm thinking David Gowan.
Oh, okay. I'll swerve. Brilliant. Well, I've got one final question, if we may. Or can I? I'll do it then. Brilliant. Perfect.
I've got a couple of anecdotes for you if you want. If you want me to
No,
finish with a couple of funny anecdotes.
let me answer this question because it's debatable, and I've got a definitive opinion, and it was voted for. Greatest sports person of all time so far.
Muhammad Ali.
I wrote down Ali as well. Brilliant. Perfect. Change of sport.
And the reason why, just to divulge a little bit on this, the reason why is, and I'm a great believer in this. I don't believe, I don't like it when sports people say, "Oh, I'm just a sports star." You know, I'm just a sports star. No, you're not. You're an icon. You're a mentor. So for that man to achieve what he did, first of all in the ring, to achieve what it wasn't a big heavyweight. It's a small heavyweight. And for those, if you've never watched it, guys, watch it. Rope-a-dope George Foreman. People thought he was going to be killed in the ring by George Foreman. And to do what he did, to have the balls, to go against all advice of his trainers as well, by the way, and sit on the ropes and be punched and punched and punched by George Foreman. And to have the wit and the wherewithal to know that at some point, this is a guy who put Joe Frazier down 6 times in 2 rounds. And after round 5, for Ali to lean forward and whisper into Foreman's ear, "Is that all you got, George?" Absolutely fantastic. Won it 3 times as a heavyweight. He was 36 years old when he won his last one. And then look at what he did as well. He seemed to recognize the public mood almost before the public mood happened. Refused to go to Vietnam because his quote was, "I ain't got no quarrel with Viet Cong." And almost as he was saying it, the whole public mood changed. Don't forget civil rights. He threw his Olympic gold medal, which he won in 1960, into the River Ohio, because there he was as a gold medalist, and he still had to be segregated in restaurants. And then even, you know, in the last 10 years, 12 years of his life with Parkinson's, and how he got himself about, etc. So for me, I think he is anyway because of what he achieved, and also the personality, the character. He was a beautiful man, wasn't he? The dancing, the charisma, the poetry. You watch him on Parkinson, you know, you watch him with Brian Clough. You know, you'll never be anybody like him. Now, it's a great pub debate, name your top 10. And, you know, you'll throw in Pele, won't you? You might throw in Messi or Ronaldo. You'll throw in, you know, Nicholas. You'll throw in Schumacher. The aficionados in F1 always go for Senna, by the way. They say he was the greatest. You know, Gretzky, Michael Jordan, of course. There's loads of them. It's a great, great pub debate. But for me, Ali's, as he said himself, was the greatest.
You can float like a butterfly and sting like a beast. That is really great. Thank you on behalf of all of us. I've thoroughly enjoyed that. I wish we could go on for hours and hours, but recruitment's back and everyone needs to go and make a few quid. You, sir, anything you need from us, we'll chuck a favour back your way. And remember, everybody, get involved with the sporting club. They do have venues in Manchester and events in Manchester, as well as the Great Smoke. Peace and love. Thank you, Ian. And I'll see you on the other side as soon as I can. Cheers, bud. Bye, everyone. Cheers, all.